If I were a kid and I were to place predictions on where I was going to be in the future, I think this is exactly where I thought I was going to be, actually.
That's crazy.
So good at foreplay.
Derek, would you like to read this episode's question of the day?
Okay. Here. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Final Marshmallow. I'm your co-host, Derek Jackman.
And I'm Dan, aka Cove.
Yes, I think it's important that we address the elephant in the room, Dan,
What's that?
aka Cove. This is your first face reveal. A lot of people have never seen your face before, man, barring me and probably Steven. But
Yep.
Aside from that, this is the first time that people get kind of a full dosage, a wholesome dosage of the Cove himself. It's a big deal.
Yeah, for those who are listening to the audio-only version, you're obviously missing out. So come to the Patreon, you'll get to see my face, my beautiful face, and Derek's beautiful face at that too. But yeah, it's taken me a while. I was very guarded when I first joined the community, and we'll talk about that, I'm sure. But I did not want to give any personal information away. I did not want to be anywhere close to showing my face. But here I am, like over a decade later. So it all comes around. So much fun.
Well, for those who have been just kind of listening to this podcast, you need to learn to see with your ears. What's wrong with you? That's just a skill issue at this point.
It's a crazy bar.
Oh, well, I think it's important that we also introduce ourselves to those who are new and aren't so ingrained in the community itself, because we want to be a lot more versatile and cast a wider net. As I said before, I'm Derek Jackman. I'm a showrunner. Dan is also a showrunner as well. We own our own shows collectively that we're both working on outside of our regular full-time jobs, too. I hope that was a good description of what you do.
Yeah, that's pretty accurate.
Awesome. Well, we're so happy to have started this new podcast, The Final Marshmallow. Before we dive into, I guess, the laundry list that we created, some of the things that are going to keep us on course that we want to talk about, including the inspiration of what helped create this podcast, I also think that it's important for us to talk a little bit about why we're doing this podcast beyond the inspiration itself. Cove and I, we've been friends for, how long would you say now? How long has it been that we've been friends for?
Maybe 5 years, something like that. Maybe something like, I don't know. What do you
think? A long time.
Yeah.
Took me like 3 years to finally get a face reveal, but yeah, I'd say it was about 5 years.
You're the quickest anybody else has gotten, so you beat like everybody else to the punch.
Darn, it's just because I'm so good at foreplay. I'm just kidding. I shouldn't have said that was a joke. Well, it's been an amazing 5 years that we've been friends, and we've gotten very comfortable with each other. But barring that, there's a disclaimer here. Cove and I, we're not actors. We're not used to being in front of a camera. Yes, I do some voice acting on the side, and that's a lot of fun, but really that's about focusing on your tonality and the way that you project your voice.
Yeah.
But in terms of being in front of a camera, both of us, this is kind of unfamiliar territory for us. So we hope that you bear with us as we continue to kind of tread into these topics that we're excited to share with you. If we didn't really have a purpose, then we wouldn't be doing this podcast. And
absolutely.
So I think it's important that we address that purpose itself. Cove, do you want to talk a little bit about what your purpose is when being one side of the same coin of this podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, obviously I've never had the chance to really nerd out as it comes to total drama. In a way to where people want to listen, and just felt like comfortable doing so. So in a way, this is fulfilling that sort of dream where we get to just talk total drama and talk all things reality TV, indie animation, whatever you want to call it. So there's that side of things, but there's also running a show at the scope and size and scale of Reality Resort. It's really hard to get episodes out frequently, especially when we're worried about funding, keeping our staff happy and paid and working, etc. So we felt like, and I felt like this was a perfect opportunity to provide supporters of specifically the Reality Project and Reality Resort with more content, with more frequent and supplemental content, get something while you're waiting and while you're graciously giving us your money as supporters, or your time and attention. So we just wanted to do our part in continuing to thank you for your support and give you more frequent content to be able to enjoy, that's topical and relevant to what we're doing here. Total Drama is, for all intents and purposes, the show that definitely ignited my passion for this genre and for writing, and just I am where I am today because of Total Drama and its community. I would have never met Derek if had it not been for that. So yeah, that's like the crux of the main reason why I'm interested and want to do this podcast, is just a space for us to just hang out and discuss the show that gets so much interesting topics and conversation online. I'll put it mildly. So it gives us a place to hang out and talk about it here, while also giving you guys more content in the interim while you wait for episodes patiently. But yeah, how about you, Derek? What would you say is your reason, and then kind of like the main reason that we really want to do this podcast?
There's a really unique quality within this community itself, and that is the connections that you
Yeah.
can forge within the community. A lot of people are very passionate about their opinions on this show, but I also want to address that, we are inspired by Total Drama, but our podcast is focused on indie animation and reality television. And so, though Total Drama is in the umbrella of that, we also want to talk a little bit more about other topics, like the other fan projects that have come out that are adjacent to Total Drama, as well as reality television shows that inspire us on a daily basis. And with the versatility in the community, the diverse opinions, there's both good and bad. We
Mm-hmm.
see a lot of positivity and a lot of negativity, and what we want to do is we want to put a spotlight on the positivity, because ultimately I think that, you can live a long life with negative influences, but I think the thing that makes that life quality is not only the people you surround yourself with, but also the choice to focus on the positivity as well. And so, one of the things that me and Cove want to do is we want to talk about the good things that come from this community. There's just a lot of voices out there, and it's easy to get overwhelmed in that. And so what we want to do is we want to point those voices in the right trajectory, as much as possible, and try and project some of the things that we're hearing within the community too. So we want to represent some of this community, while at the same time not overstepping as well. But we want to give you our perspectives as showrunners too, because I think that, and you could probably agree with me on this, Cove, that there is kind of a misconception of what it takes to create an indie animated project
100%.
as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
And there are so many different things that have inspired our shows. My show isn't fully inspired by Total Drama.
Mhm.
I would say that there are actually bigger influences that inspired my show, and I'm sure the same is the case for you. Want to also kind of sidestep a little bit and change the subject before we dive into talking about our shows and how we came up with the inception of them. And I want to address the elephant in the room, which is this thing that is right behind me. Cove, so you were able to work with some people to get this graphic created, which some of these people are a part of your team right now.
Yep.
Talk about this. What inspired this graphic right here? This thing is sick. I love how they gave me a chiseled jawline. That was very
Yeah,
kind of
we
them.
look incredibly jacked, and we look incredibly beautiful, far more than we deserve. And we also are wearing outfits that neither of us could pull off in real life. So I think it is an exceptionally well done piece of art. But the artist who created it, Roman, he created the entire Reality Resort cast, the designs for all the characters. He worked on a couple of backgrounds and props and everything. He's been like my main go-to guy since the beginning of this project. He's great. He's always willing and able to help out whenever, and that's the one thing I love about, not the one thing, but a big thing I love about working on a big team like this. It's just getting to meet and discuss with and get to work with all these different kind of creatives and artists and animators And just having these kind of people at my disposal whenever I have an idea that I can't specifically make, and I go to someone and I'm like, hey, can you like help me out and like create this promo image for this? And they're like, yeah, no problem. And they can bring my vision to life pretty much exactly how I was hoping. It's such an awesome collaborative experience. And I pretty much gave him a very simple prompt, like Derek and I sitting at a campfire with marshmallows on a stick, and it's like in a on the beach, you know. And they like, cool, I got you. A week later, turns out that I'm like, sick, that's awesome. So it's really cool to be able to just like work with artists kind of in tandem like that. And yeah, I think I came out really awesome. And then shout out to Alex as well, one of our asset artists who made the simplified version of the logo that you'll see on all of our social medias as well.
That's fantastic. You know, it's one thing to say something, and then it's another thing to put it in action. And I think this is a perfect example of that. A lot of these people came from the community that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And so we want to interact with them as well as, bring to light some of the topics that people keep bringing up. Because this is a very talented and skillful community full of a lot of good people. And so I'm glad that we were able to highlight some of those people. We get to work with such amazing artists and
So true. Yeah.
animators and voice actors. It's so amazing the privileges that we've been able to kind of take advantage of within this community itself. And not in a bad way at all. It's all been such a positive journey. And it seems like you and I have had very similar experiences, especially as we communicate with each other behind the scenes.
Hmm.
Um, but ultimately, the reason we're doing this podcast, this first one, is so that people can get to know us, right?
Yep.
And so ultimately, I think it's important that we talk a little bit about our backgrounds. How did we land ourselves in the total drama community, which eventually put us under the umbrella of indie animation and reality television? And so, on a broader scope, Cove, how did you end up here in the seat that you're sitting in right now?
Yeah. Crazy. I never really know how to start the story. And some people have heard it before. I know a lot of my core audience members, they might have heard this story before, but and we kind of discussed it a little bit briefly on our teaser video. But yeah, it really starts, as far as back as middle school, I think, maybe even before that. I have no memory of watching total drama, but I was a normal kid. I just liked cartoons. I liked, I was always a writer in class. I was never a test taker. I was always like, I write short stories. I'd rather do an essay, whatever. And I just remember watching total drama action in my parents' bedroom. I vividly remember Harold in a confessional, and that is my first memory I still have to this day of total drama. I think it was the final.
Harold.
I think it was the final 5 episode of total drama action. Like
Oh my goodness.
when they were doing like the kung fu thing or whatever. I think that's what I'm thinking of. But anyway, so that's like my first living memory. I have no idea how I got into total drama island, if I watched it afterwards. I have no idea, but I know that it inspired me enough to really deeply care about not only the characters but just the format and the genre and just the style of the show. Something hooked me, and I didn't know what it was, and I probably still don't know the full extent of what exactly hooked me in that moment. I have guesses, and I think a lot of it comes down to the elimination format, but something just hooked me. And so I remember in middle school, my next memory is on a swivel chair that we had in our living room. I would, after school, hop on my laptop, pull up PowerPoint, and just take these character PNGs from the wiki and move them around. You do wild text boxes, like things you would like only a middle schooler could think of, for dialogue, and upload them to YouTube. Because I'm like, well, if nobody else is going to watch them, I can't be the only one who watches them, right? So even if nobody else watches them, let me just put them out there on YouTube. And lo and behold, I kind of did that, probably seventh, eighth, ninth, probably up to 10th grade, pretty consistently. I started doing like my ways. I coined them. So Total Drama Island, Action, World Tour, Revenge, All Stars. I stopped for a little bit because I realized I'm getting too old for this. Like, this is weird. This is cringe. This is a dumb hobby. I had got like maybe a couple of thousand subscribers at that point. I'm just like, this is weird. And then once Pakatu Island came out, and that was the summer of my junior year of high school, I picked it back up. I'm like, dang, this is like, the itch just got me again. I'm just like, I got to do this again. So I did Pakatu Island my way. And when I say my way, I mean another way. This was definitely not my way. I just created an alternative universe to what was actually going on. So I did that, and I did All Stars, and then I backtracked and I did Island through Revenge again. And then I made my own cast. I commissioned my own cast with money that I'd earned from chores and other birthdays and whatever. Found Psycho. Shout out to Psycho, the first artist I ever worked with. Found her on DeviantArt. Probably shouldn't have been on that website when I was young, but hey, whatever. Brought me to Psycho,
Hindsight's
and
always 2020.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I avoided some pretty bad places on that website, thankfully, and I was just focused on the total drama art. But anyway,
That's good.
I commissioned my own cast of like 16 characters. Continued to utilize them in this PowerPoint way. Um, Fast forward through college. Now I'm in college. I just moved. I had just gotten broken up with, and I just started college. So I was not mentally okay at that point in time, and I retreated to introverted tendencies, and I just kind of secluded myself on my laptop. My first semester of college, and what did I do? I started making total drama videos again. I hosted camps, and I'd make videos for those, otherwise known as orgs now. I think the name has kind of shifted to online reality games. Through Skype. We always held them. Moved over to Discord eventually, but anyway, all that to say, I eventually commissioned my second cast for my own series, Total Drama Next Generation. For those who are not aware of what that is, or don't know me from that, and then a couple years down the line, 7 seasons later of that, almost 10,000 subscribers from just literal PowerPoints. I had finally reached a point where I was like, okay, I'm done. But every time I had tried to stop, something in my mind was like, you got to keep going. You got more ideas. Like there's just keep going. Like keep writing. You need a creative outlet. Like this is what you need to be doing. And I was just like trying to avoid it. I was trying to ignore it. I was just like, this feels like super juvenile. This is embarrassing. Like why am I still caring so much about these PowerPoints? Whatever. And the show that's like clearly not made for me anymore. Like I'm approaching my 20s. I'm in my 20s. Like why do I still care about this preteen show? So once I finished my last season of that PowerPoint series, I really just looked at myself, and I'm just like, you know what? I really think this is where my calling is. The amount of comments that I got on my PowerPoint series that they preferred my series over Total Drama, that they thought my writing was so great, that they really love these characters, that these people were getting emotional over static PNGs that were gliding around the screen with no voiceover. And I'm like, it was just constant validation that people actually really cared for and enjoyed my writing and the stories that I wanted and had to tell. And I was just like, that was the reason I kept going at the end of the day, is because people kept telling me how much it meant to them and how much they really enjoyed it. And I'm like, well, the only next logical step that is not going to be a waste of my time is if I was able to actually do a full production, full animation. And that's kind of how I got to this point. But I kind of realized along the way that there was just something so magnetic about this genre to me. It's the only genre I care to write about. Anytime I've tried to write a non-elimination format show, I axe it within a few episodes because I was like, I don't care. I need the stakes of competition. Like I just really need that
Something
as the
beautiful
driving
about,
factor. Yeah.
yeah, something
So
absolutely magnificent about like the heroism of sacrifice, and also like a last man standing underdog tale that you can also tell as well,
absolutely.
because you have to get through everybody else to make it to the end.
Yeah.
Um,
It's just human
so I
nature.
get what you're saying.
Yeah. It's competition, survival of the fittest. It's just you can tell so many relatable stories through the lens of a competition, and just seeing what people do when the stakes are high and there's pressure on them and people are watching, and you see what people bring into this game, the baggage they have, the things that they need to go through. Like there's just endless potential, and you can see it in the way that the My Way craze hit this fandom like a storm in the 2010s, where everybody had an opinion and everybody had an alternate universe of how they wanted these shows to go. And it's just unlimited, untapped potential. And I saw that, and I realized after the reboot seasons that I did not, what Total Drama was giving me was, let me backtrack. What Total Drama was giving is not what I wanted anymore. Well, it was clearly not for me anymore. I had outgrown it, and I was like, I want something different. I want something more mature. I want something more relatable, something more personable, with characters that I care about, with characters that feel real.
You've
Um,
grown up a little
yeah, I
bit.
was like,
The demographic is no
yes,
longer like, you're no longer in the target demographic.
exactly. Like I was looking for more strategic competence. I was looking for more character development and that was meaningful and not overlooked. Not to say Total Trauma's writing is terrible. I think yeah, it gets a lot of flack for certain reasons, justifiably so, but also it's for kids. And at the end of the day, I kind of had to pull myself back and kind of realize that, you know, it's okay. Like there's going to be a place in my heart for Total Drama for the rest of my life, but it's also at the point where like I can step away from it, but I also, because of it, at the same time, have this never-ending itch that I need to scratch to create my own version of it. And so that's kind of how I got here to this day. I probably missed some points. We can talk about it more later, but yeah, it was really just a never-ending journey of like, I don't want to do this, but I keep having the desire and the creative energy and juice to do this. And I'm feeling embarrassed about it. No one in my real life knows about it, but I'm gonna keep doing it because it's just what I enjoy doing the most. So much so that that kind of like tanked my grades a little bit in college because all I cared about was making this PowerPoints, and I did not really care about my grades. Sorry, mom and dad. Hey, mom and dad, I'm not doing fine. Just kidding.
Look where you are now.
Yeah. But yeah, that's pretty much my
Midlife
story.
crisis. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, we're good. We're good. But yeah, that's pretty much the extent of my journey to where I started and how I got here. It's simple, but it's also, I skipped a lot of details and a lot of introspection, but there was a lot of self realizing and a lot of growing along the way that like made me more comfortable in being able to do this, being able to reveal my face, talk about total drama in public, and pursue this animation studio as a real time, real career. But yeah, that's enough talking about myself. I don't like that. I just not ranted, but I just rambled for like 10 minutes. So now it's your turn, Derek. You tell the people how you got into this and how you got into that seat right now, that perfect velvety red seat.
Well, before I get to proceed into my own narcissism and like get to construct a narrative of how great I am, I want to talk a little bit about some things that you had mentioned
Sure.
that I really relate to a lot. And that's that, you had talked about how you stepped away from the total drama community. Essentially, you stopped making those PowerPoints, but
Mhm.
then you hit a deep slope in your life where you were heartbroken and you decided to isolate, and then you found a lot of light in the story that you started creating. And I think that that's kind of a misconception that a lot of people have with indie animation, is that entertainment has a lot of power, but the
Yes.
greatest currency is not money.
Mm.
It's inspiration. And for you, this show, and I can speak to this as well, that's your baby. That's your child. And so anytime people identify with your child, with your baby, when they're like, this really brought me out of a slump, this impacted me in this way, I love the way this is written, that's as if somebody's complimenting your child.
Yeah.
um it would be much more radical if we actually had children, right?
Yeah,
but
sure.
but we don't. So right now, as random single dudes, well, one of us is, uh um we look at this, and these projects, these shows are basically a legacy that we've built in a world that we created because we felt safe in it. And so a lot of people, they make requests, and they criticize, which, by the way, constructive criticism is always good and welcome.
Absolutely.
But
Yeah.
as soon as people start kind of tearing other shows down, that's where I see a big lapse in judgment, because the simple truth is, creators, especially indie animators, they're not making a lot of money.
Yeah.
They're doing it purely because they're inspired. And so for Cove, who, you know, I know that your first priority is to pay your team, and then you pay yourself last. But
Mm.
your source of income is really the inspiration along the way. It's the journey, it's the adventure, and you hope that you can turn it into a full-time career in the long run,
Yes,
because you want to be
absolutely.
able to support a family, right?
Yes. Yep.
But and do what you love to do at the same time. There's
Absolutely.
this quote, and I'm getting a little bit sidetracked, but a guy that I had interviewed in the past, his name is Olin Rogers, a comedian, super, super awesome guy. And he said this one quote once. He said, people can tell you, or they will tell you, that you can't make a living out of what you love to do. But are you really living by not doing that? And that
Deep.
struck a massive chord with me, and I'm sure it does with you as well, Cove.
Yeah.
Olin Rogers, he went off to, he was just a comedian who made shorts on YouTube, on an old YouTube channel called Balloon Shop, and then he sold a successful show onto HBO Max, and he ran 3 seasons of it. And it was a cartoon, by the way. Started off as an indie pilot that got
Mm.
picked up, and that was kind of a huge deal. and it was cool to kind of watch his story unfold. And now he works for Glitch Studios.
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
crazy.
what a
Yeah,
guy.
yeah. What a journey.
But um, but I think the thing that's like the most profound part of this is every character that's within our stories, even though they are a tool to be utilized within the universe itself, we also, maybe I'm just speaking for myself here, but let me know if you agree with this, Cove. I find myself identifying with every single one of my characters.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
every single one of them has a small piece of me, and I think that that is not just a virtual code; it's a genetic one. I just hit my
Yeah.
microphone on accident, but
No, I totally agree with that.
and
I've had,
yeah,
I've always tell my I don't want to say fans because that just like sounds like I'm gassing myself up, but I've always told consumers of my content that I it's really hard to rank my own characters because I've always constantly asked, can you do a rank your own characters, like specifically as it relates to Total Drama Next Generation and that cast, and I'm just like, I can't because they're all my babies, like they're all characters I specifically created with specific intentions
yeah,
that have very specific roles to fill. And there was a running joke that one character in particular, her name is Wendell, that I did not. She was the only one I did not like, and it was just a running joke within the fandom. If you know, you know. But outside of her, like there was really no character that goes unnoticed or unintended or unused in a way that doesn't hit home to some extent. Like if they're all created with a specific purpose in mind, whether they're based off somebody that I know, but that the storylines that they go through and the characters that they have in development is based off of real stories that either I have partaken in or have seen firsthand. Like there are so many characters in that first cast of Next Generation that the storylines that happened were based on what was happening in my real life at that time. The interactions, the friendships, the heartbreaks, all those things were based on things that were happening. So they're all, even though not every character is, a Gary Stu that's based off of me, right? There are so many parts of ourselves and our identities and our experiences in those characters. So I absolutely agree. Like there's always all these characters are our babies. The entire universe, the entire show, like you said before, is they're our babies. We care about them all equally, if even if it doesn't come across that way. Because at the end of the day, a character's got to go home first, and a character's got to win. So at the end of the day, so they're not all going to be treated equally, even though they're all conceptualized equally.
I'll find myself in meetings with some of my artists, and we'll talk about storylines and some of the characters. And a lot of the time, I'll be like, "Oh yeah, that's my favorite." And then like 5 minutes later, they'll bring up another character, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's my favorite." And it's so hard because it's almost like it almost feels like there's relevancy bias because they're all so great in their own ways, but to me, you
Yeah.
know?
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think it's important that people understand that indie animation, these creators are writing stories for themselves, not just for the audience. But that's also kind of the double-edged sword of indie animation itself,
Yep.
because without money, you don't have the proper water to hydrate your show. And I think that's where we've both kind of found ourselves. But you actually have an amazing announcement that is awesome about your show, and we'll get to that. We'll get to that very, very soon. I'm
Teaser.
really excited for you
Yeah.
to make that announcement.
Well, by the time this goes
Um,
live, everyone will already know. But it's
yeah, but right
yeah,
now it's relevant. It
retroactive.
happened like
Yeah.
a couple hours ago,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
like to us.
Retroactively,
It's
it'll
a
still be
big
cool.
deal.
Yeah. 100%.
Well, I'm so proud of the strides you've made. I've
Thank you.
seen a lot of growth in you as a showrunner. And for those of you who are just tuning in for the very first time, I'm a voice actor on Cove's show.
Oh yeah,
So
we
I
probably
do a
should have
little
said
bit of show running
that.
on the side.
Yeah,
And sorry, what?
we probably should have said that.
Yeah,
By the way, yeah.
it totally spaced my mind. I do a little bit of voice acting for a plethora of different shows, and Reality Resort is one of them. I have the privilege and opportunity to voice the frat boy bratty daddy, Brad Whitaker, and it is such a blast. But I've also been able to get involved behind the scenes and see the way Cove's mind works. And Cove, like, I hope you don't mind if I talk you up a little bit,
Why not?
but Dan Dan is very methodical, extremely strategic, and very well organized. I mean, you
Dang.
should see some of the stuff he's put together. And I don't like blowing smoke up anybody's rear end, right? That's not my style. I like to be honest and sincere, and so I wouldn't be saying this if it was just a bunch of empty words. This is genuinely what I've seen, and I've been able to see this in a lot of other people within the community as well. And that really kind of testifies of what we were talking about earlier, how inspiration is exactly what's keeping this community alive. And so for me, I guess I should probably talk about how I ended up in this community and
Please.
in this seat today
Absolutely.
too.
I'm ready. Yeah.
Um, so when I was a kid, I don't remember if I was a kid or a young teenager, but I remember I saw this commercial and it was a Pop Tart commercial. Uh,
Okay.
out of all places,
Yeah.
man. Um, and I had no clue what total drama was. I don't even think total drama was a thing at the time, but Survivor certainly was, and I had no
Mm.
clue what Survivor was either. Reality television was a foreign entity in my life. I'd never gotten acquainted with it. I kind of stayed away from it because I thought a lot of the things that they were portraying on reality television was just a negative
Mm-hmm.
feedback loop, and so
Yeah.
I avoided it. Especially as a kid, I thought it was just very damaging.
Mm.
Um, I don't think that's the case for Survivor. I do think that's the case for a lot of reality television. I know I would put some safeguards on what my children can watch in the
Absolutely.
future. But I was watching some cartoon. I don't know. It was on Cartoon Network. It might have been Codename Kids Next Door. I loved that show when I was a kid.
That was a great
Um,
show. Yeah.
what an amazing show. How amazing. But I was, this is back when it was just like cable television, right? And so I hit the commercials and there was this Pop Tart commercial that came up and it was like there's four Pop Tarts and they all had faces and stuff like that and they were all animated and then it was like only one of them is gonna come out of this alive. And I was like, oh, that was really interesting, kind of like a survival of the fittest, who will it be? Place your votes. I don't really remember the specific details of the commercial, but then I remember turning on the TV like a few months later, and it was like a follow-up commercial to that commercial, and the Pop Tart with a bandana had survived, and I was like, what is this? I'm really compelled and intrigued by it. Like, I don't know why. It tapped into my biological instinct of natural selection, convergent
Uh-huh.
evolution, whatever you call it. And and it just like it really piqued my interest. And a few years later, I saw a clip of Total Drama, and I thought to myself, my parents would not approve of this. I got to one of the sketchier scenes, and
Mm-hmm.
I was like, yeah, yeah, not watching this. Uh, but then I think it was like at the ending of a school year or something. Like I had a day off, something was going on, and Total Drama was re-airing some of their episodes. Um, it was still releasing its first season, and I just happened to stumble upon, I was really, really bored, and none of the shows that I was interested in were playing. So I stumbled upon Total Drama Island, channel 176, by the way, for Cartoon Network. If anybody, if you know, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Um, and and we were in the final four, and so it was Duncan, Owen, Heather, Gwen, and
Spoilers.
I was like, whoa, these characters are dope. I didn't really identify with any of them,
Mm-hmm.
but it made me wonder who else had competed that I might have been able to identify with, you
Yeah.
know? And and so it just so happens that like the next day they were rerunning the whole season
Mm.
on the channel, like the whole season all the way up until like the final three, and then they were going to release the finale and things like it was a big deal. And so I watched that episode. Mr. Coconut had just been eliminated, and I was like,
Ah.
that was awesome. And so, and then I watched the next episode. Duncan was eliminated, and I was hooked. Like right from those first two episodes, which was
Mm.
at the ending of the season,
Yeah, that's crazy.
it hooked me. because they finished that season so strong. Yeah, it was totally crazy. Um, but I found myself identifying with a few of the other characters through the reruns, and I was like, well, darn, I know they don't make it to the final four, but I really hope they make it far, you know? And some of
Mm-hmm.
them did. Some of them made it far, and I just was so happy uh, that I got to identify with some of those characters. And then when Total Drama, 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 Drama Island came out, I
Mm.
was like, oh, I'm here for the long run. I want to see it go, only to be kind of a little disappointed in the next season, but that's just me.
To put it
But
lightly, yeah.
either way, uh, it was a journey that led me. It was a gateway, is what I should
Mm.
say. It was a gateway into the community, and I started participating in the old school YouTube total drama camps. And that was it was very similar to what Cove kind of explained. Whereas you did all of your stuff on Skype, which eventually transitioned over to Discord. For us, this was like old school YouTube before Google even bought it. You could send private messages to one another, and that's what we did. We just DM'd each other. We were all participating on this camp that people basically kind of put together PowerPoint video presentations, or just like copy and pasted PowerPoint just video presentations, and they were narratives based upon the conversations that we had. And because of that, I got so ingrained in the community. I got to meet so many great people. Granted, I was just a kid, I was just a teenager, and everybody else was too. We were all very much the same age, but it was a great time, and I got to share some very sentimental experiences. And lo and behold, I'm here 14 years later. Um, and I'm show running my own cartoon. Dude, I went to college to become a dentist.
That's crazy. Yeah.
Like the
Look at you
the
now.
fact that I'm pursuing cartoons is kind of wild, but there were a lot of miracles along the way, and I have faith, and I
Mm.
think that also influenced me. And so I feel like there's kind of a greater calling in what I do, and I'm totally unashamed and very proud to be able to not only be myself in this community, but to pursue what I'm so passionate about. Um, and again, Total Drama, I think it was a spark that ignited a greater fire, and then a lot of other shows really added to that bonfire that we call inspiration. So that I think that's kind of where my story comes from. Is it originates from that stupid Pop Tart commercial,
Dude, we
which
gotta find that. We
eventually
gotta find that commercial.
I love that. I haven't seen that since I was a kid, since
Yeah,
the day that it happened. I bet you it's online somewhere. We should. I bet you it
absolutely.
was just heavily inspired by Survivor, but we should pull that up on a future podcast. Maybe we can play it on a future podcast, depending on copyright
Hmm.
circumstances. But I think that would be so fun. I think it'd be so fun.
Yeah. Well, one of the things you said, which stood out to me, is like you felt like you had a calling of sorts in this in this field of writing, of storytelling, etc. And I feel like that's exactly I relate to that a lot. Like that's kind of exactly where I got to the place where I was. My wife didn't even know that I was making these PowerPoints. Like nobody in my personal, real, everyday life, except for my sister, knew that I was making these PowerPoints. And so, when I decided to stop for the last time, and then I still had that creative itch. I'm like, I still need to do something creatively. Like, I need to do something. Like, I have just like this itching to do this. I'm like, that's where it kind of hit me that like maybe this is my calling. Maybe the hundreds of, if not thousands of comments that I've received over the last 6, 7, 8, 9 years, um, that have been validating this belief that maybe, because I never really thought that I had great writing skills. I just like to write for fun, and people just happen to like them. I'm just like, maybe this is leading towards something. Like maybe I'm supposed to be doing this. Like I remember one comment, and I think it was on the finale of my All Star season that I did, All Stars adjacent season for my Next Generation season, and it pretty much went to the tune of, you deserve to take a break, but I really hope you come back and you keep making this because this is what you're supposed to do. It's like it was a comment to that extent from a random stranger online who had been following my series for who knows how long. And I was just like blown away by someone being so nice enough to comment that and just really instilling me with the creative fire to keep this going. And so I really just relate to what you said, and I think your inspiration, your drive, and your authenticity is kind of what also inspired me to take the leap of faith into doing this as well. And we can kind of talk about how we kind of converged and crossed paths as well because we didn't really know each other for the longest time throughout our community run. But yeah, just like
I
been
feel like we
working.
heard of each other though, you
Yeah,
know? Yeah, very
yeah,
much heard through different channels and sources. Like we knew about each other, but we didn't know each other.
yeah. I think it's our good friend Steven is the one who was our mutual link all those years ago, which I think it was. I don't know if you want me to name drop this, but I think it was your Christmas. What was it called? The Christmas series that you did.
Holiday hostage,
Holiday
yeah.
Hostage. Yeah, there we go. That's how Steven first found you. I think we could talk about that if you want. Kind of how about how we kind of came to be friends and kind of how our paths crossed as well.
Yeah, yeah. Steven was our connector, 100%. To be honest, I think it'd be great to eventually one day feature him on as a guest.
Yeah,
And maybe we talk a little bit about what his perspective was because it did unify us, you know? A lot of the reason that most industries uh you hear the phrase, if you really want that career, it's about who you know,
hmm,
right? Um, and there's truth to that. For a lot of people, I think that they're very tainted by that kind of concept because it's
yeah,
like, well, it should be about merit. And
hmm,
yes, it 100% should be. But also, you invest in smart investments, and typically, smart investments are what you know.
yeah,
And so when people are vetted, then that's a safe bet, right?
yeah,
And so when Cove and I got to know each other, in my perspective, you had already been talked up. And so
yeah,
I automatically was already like, yeah, I can say all the controversial stuff I want around Cove and not get canceled. I'm just kidding.
yeah.
But but no, as soon as I met Cove, I was just like, it just kind of felt like I was hanging out with a friend. Grab a bowl of cereal, let's hang out, right?
Absolutely.
So that's kind of what it felt like for me. And
Do you remember the first thing that
and
we did together, which I think was really like one of our first ever conversations that we had, especially like over Discord. Do you remember? It was for your channel.
did we play Among Us?
It wasn't Among Us. No, it was you had me on to for your Total Drama Action rewrite. It was the second part. You
That
had
was
me.
our first
I'm like 99%
interaction.
sure that was our like
Ah,
first like time talking. So,
no
which
way.
was a phenomenal video because that was like you were the first person, and I will always give you credit for this. We're so ingrained in a community that has very similar opinions, and we have a very big group think going on, and
Yeah.
everybody just kind of comes to the same consensus, and then the majority rules, and we kind of just go off of that opinion. Like for a classic example, Courtney's derailed in All Stars, right? Or um, Beth should not have won Total Drama Action, right? And so we all just kind of
Amen.
go into amen indeed. We all go into these conversations having these same opinions, but when we recorded that video, which was you doing, it was the second part of you doing your Total Drama Action rewrite because, and we could talk about this eventually, but you have very strong feelings about Total Drama Action, and I was always of the
Oh,
opinion
so
that
strong.
I was always of the opinion that I would only I like just swap Beth with Lindsay or just swap Duncan with Harold or it was pretty salvageable with a few moves, but you really opened my eyes to different opinions and different ways of thinking because of how different your rewrite for Total Drama Action was, and I was just like, wow, this like really inspired me to like think differently and to be open to other like opinions, which sounds really silly, but it was just from one creative to another. Like that was my first time that I really felt like a connection to you because I'm like, you think the same way I do, in a sense of like you, and even maybe even more complex than I do because you were just thinking, why do I don't have to stick to the status quo? Like I can completely reinvent, not even reinvent, but just take these characters back to their roots that they showed at Island and make us way more of a um, sequel season than what we actually got in canon, right? And I just thought it was brilliant. I thought your rewrite was amazing, and it really made me think differently about how I viewed not only the series in general, but kind of just how I go about rewriting things and like doing my own versions of things and how I write my own show today. So I just want to give you props for that. So
Oh, yeah, I appreciate the heck out of that, man. And Cove, you sat through what was it, like 2 hours of
like that.
that?
Yeah.
Um, it was just such a privilege. I rarely do I ever get to nerd out in real life with my friends
Hmm.
about these kind of things because they're business people. My friends are all business people. They invest
Hmm.
in crypto. They do
Yeah.
it.
All the
They're
fun
just
stuff.
business
Yeah.
people.
All the adult stuff.
So I don't get to
Yeah.
talk about the creative side of things. I have a business mentality, but
Mhm.
I'm very influenced by creative things. And so, yeah, I see a lot of myself in you as much as you see in me. And I think that's why it just like was so natural.
Yeah.
From then on, like our friendship has really just kind of blossomed. We've never had any hiccups, and lo and behold, now here we are doing our very first podcast for the Final Marshmallow. Technically the second, but technically it's the first.
For all intents and
It
purposes. Yeah.
depends. The first one's really zero. It's number zero. This one's number one.
Yeah.
But
Semantics.
but yeah, and now we got graphics of ourselves
Look how
holding up
far we've come.
marshmallows in front of a fire.
I know.
Yeah.
Crazy.
How dope is that? I just, if I were a kid and I were to place predictions on where I was going to be in the future, I think this is exactly where I thought I was going to be actually.
That's crazy.
But but here's the weird part is when I became an adult, when I turned 19, I think 19 and 20
Hmm.
is when I was, officially planning to go become a dentist. Like I would have never thought that I would have gone in this direction.
Yeah.
Um, because I very, very much value stability. And right now, the animation field is tricky. It's very tricky. It's really risky. You have to take risks in order to succeed, but sometimes those risks don't pay off. And so tenacity is typically what dictates success
Mm.
because you have to try and fail again. But that doesn't matter. What matters is if you try and fail to try again, right?
Hmm.
And and so I think that you and I are kind of just in that phase where we're failing. We're constantly failing, succeeding in a lot of ways. I'd say your show is a massive success,
Thank you.
but along the way there's big time failures, and in my opinion, like the acronym of fail, FAIL, is first attempt in learning, right?
Mm.
You're learning. It's a process, and uh and we need to be very forgiving of ourselves and others so that we can progress as not only in character but as a community. And so I think that my entire story is one of failing but failing upward.
Mm, yeah,
And so
absolutely.
um and that's where it was. And a lot of mini miracles and a recalibration of my pursuits as well. Again, like I wanted to be a dentist, right? That's where I went to college, but I think God had other plans for me. He recalibrated that trajectory and pointed me in a different direction. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for the
Yeah.
failures that I've had, and I'm proud of what it's molded me into, as well as what I've seen it mold you into as well. I know that it's hard being a showrunner. It's extremely difficult.
Yeah.
You're living paycheck to paycheck. You're living a net negative life right now financially. Um, a net positive if we're talking inspiration and
Hmm.
what you love to do, but it's very cumbersome too because when you think of a studio, there's a lot of people you can delegate to, and you don't really have to burden yourself with the financial responsibility because you have a finance department and an HR department that takes
Right.
care of that for you.
Yep.
Whereas in indie animation, that is something you're helming everything. You are the HR department, the finance department, the marketing department, the animation department, the art department, the voice acting director. You are every single piece of this project, And I think that that qualifies you more than people who were born in the industry, because you are involved in every single piece of your production. And that's something that I don't think a lot of people know. And in so doing, you're still juggling a full-time job while doing this full-time, but you're using your full-time job money to pay for this to work full time. And so it is a very difficult thing to manage and to juggle. It's not for the lighthearted or the
You got to really want it.
extremely
Yeah.
oversensitive, but I know that it's going to pay its dividends, not just financially, but just in the long run of creating our universes. I know and have faith that the future is very bright for our projects. That's just my perspective on our journeys. Is even though we failed, we so did Walt Disney.
Hmm.
So did Walt Disney. I mean, you look at his story and look at it outside looking in. I mean, the man was tenacious, he was talented. He failed a lot of the time. I mean, he's very inspired by his brother Roy. I hope I'm not giving too much of a history lesson, but I might even be talking too much. So Cove, interrupt me if I am. But I mean,
Keep going.
Roy was a big inspiration for Walt Disney, enough to where like Roy was drafted for war in World War One. Walt Disney fudged his papers to serve on the front lines as a medic.
Mm,
And then when he came back, he started his own studio, went bankrupt before he became a household name. Like,
that's
so
crazy.
indie animation is really embodying the Disney dream, the traditional one. Um, back when Disney was a little different than it is today. I think it's just a little different than it was before. Um, but I'd say that a lot of indie animators are following in suit that kind of dream where they're chasing the things that inspire them, and then they're creating a whole world with those specific elements, and they're not stopping. They're tenacious, and because of that, they're going to find success. And so that's what makes me have so much belief that Reality Resort is going to be a thing in 10 years. Like it's a
Hmm.
thing now, but it's going to be an even bigger thing in 10 years from now. And it's like, look at what happened to Total Drama.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
it's not even being aired right now. And
I know.
years after it was off air, the community was still thriving. 8 years afterwards, enough to where they revived the show because of the community. You know, I think that we should pat ourselves on the back for that, because the community kept this thing that the production thought it was dead, but we were like, no, there's still this spark here and it's motivating us. And they saw that, they jumped on it, revived the show, and here we are. And
Yeah, it's kind of
so,
crazy. Crazy when you think about it. The community really did rally to keep the show relevant in a way that I don't feel like many other fandoms have. And I can remember vividly when the Drama Rama announcement was made, but we don't have to talk about that right now. But that said, circling back to all the things that you were talking about, I've to your point, like I fully feel like I've learned so much over these past few years. It's been about 18, 19 months, I think, since the first episode of Reality Resort dropped. And the amount of learning that I've done, while, like you said, while juggling not only a full time job, but also a wife and a dog and friendships, um, trying to, stay somewhat healthy, right? Like all these things on top of making zero sense personally for myself for making this project and like you said before, like you really gotta want this to make it happen. And I think similarly to what you're talking about Walt Disney, and this is why you're on the podcast, so you can give us history lessons because I didn't know that and that was cool. But similarly to him, like he just never gave
it's the
up,
only
right?
reason I'm on the podcast.
Yeah, we just need you for the fact checking and the history lessons. Yeah,
Yeah, I got you.
yeah. But anyway, it's just like and this is not to toot my own horn. I hope it doesn't come off that way, but I truly feel like I'm one of the only people that truly cares about this very niche genre and the intricacies of it and how intentional you can craft storylines through it. And it's what keeps me up at night. It's what I think about constantly, more than I probably should think about these sort of things. It is just what
Amen.
energizes me every day to think about this
Yeah.
show and what I can do better and how I can make it better and how I can tell better stories um, and just different ways to tell them, etc. So I've learned a lot. My only resource for this industry has been my sister, and because she was, I don't want to dox her, but she worked in the industry for a little bit and then now she's out. But she was the only person and the only resource I had for anything that was going on throughout this entire journey. So I just want to shout her out real quick and thank her for all of her help and support along the way. But outside of that, I've never run an organization, a studio, a team like this before. I think it naturally falls into some of my strengths because I do like organization and I do like management to a degree. So it worked out on that end, but it is a lot of learning, a lot of different moving parts. And every day, I that thought comes to my head. I'm like, should I stop this? Like, this is a lot. I'm constantly, not constantly, but I'm overworked, very stressed, and nothing. There's no fruit of my labor yet. But then I look back, I wake up in the morning, and I think about we're an indie animation studio that has raised pretty much almost $100,000 between Kickstarter and Patreon. We've made 11 episodes so far, and people keep asking for more, and people want to keep supporting. And we have a team that's so committed and dedicated to finishing this season and to continuing to see this blossom. And it's just so crazy to me how far we've gotten. Like as we try to take this full circle to where we started and where we are now. And I didn't even talk about my big brother obsession, which I'm sure we'll get to at some point. But this has really just culminated in exactly where I feel like I need to be and where I want to be. Kind of like what you said. When I was in fourth grade, I wanted to be an author, and little did I know that I would be somewhat adjacent to an author and pursuing something pretty close to that. And I look back at childhood and the innocence of it, and just feeling the purity. I feel like you really know yourself, or you know the person that you're supposed to be when you're young. I truly do feel that. Like there is a part of you that you know what you're going to turn into, and I feel like that part of my child is coming out with this show. It's coming out like I always wanted to write, and it was always in me, and now it's coming out. And I don't know really what I'm saying at this point. It kind of just all felt like it was kind of just spewing out of my mouth. But the point I'm trying to make is that I'm just super grateful to be where I'm at, to have these friendships and connections that we've gotten, and to be sitting here with you in this episode and this podcast, talking about the shows and the industry of all these things that we've come to learn a lot about over the last few years and come to really love and enjoy. And I'm just excited to keep talking about it.
It is a privilege to be working alongside with you. I think our friendship has kind of blossomed quite a bit throughout the years, but also our working relationship has been very strong as well. I feel like you're a reliable dude, and that's what makes you a good showrunner. There's there's a lot of people in this world that are creatives and a lot of people who are business minded.
Hmm.
Um, Vertical versus lateral thinkers, and I think it's really rare to come across somebody who's both a vertical and a lateral thinker, someone who's both business oriented but also creative inspired. And so I find myself really identifying with your story and just who you are, and I also feel just immensely grateful to be voicing one of your characters, Brad. Speaking of
Right.
which, Bratty Daddy, I mean, let's address the other elephant in the room, which is the fact that you managed to create this specific story inspired by other stories, which derives from, your PowerPoint experiences, Total Drama, other shows that really inspired you. And now you've created these characters that other people can identify with. Now, you've talked a little bit about what that means to you. You touched on that. Have you had any personal experiences with people who have told you this character I really identify with, therefore they've helped me in my life? Have you seen anything like that?
Yeah, I've definitely gotten, obviously nothing in person because people don't know who I am in person, but I've gotten many
One day,
comments. One day.
Comic-Con 2027,
Yeah, yeah,
you know?
sure. Don't hold me to that. But I've gotten a lot of comments specifically about that. Like, this got me through a rough patch. Like, I know one of my most loyal supporters has constantly reminded me and told me that, he worked a crappy job and he would always come home and watch an episode of my show and just feel so much better. And it wasn't maybe a specific character, though I have gotten comments about that as well. But that is always something that I might have taken for granted at first because I'm like, that's awesome, but like I'm not gonna keep doing this, right? Like it's cool that you found some interest in my hobby, but now that I'm thinking about it and I've matured a little bit and evolved and kind of am thinking back on it, I'm like, that is such a cool feeling. That is such a amazing thing and opportunity that we get to do as showrunners and creators and storytellers is to reach people in ways that we didn't know was possible, and they probably didn't know was possible either, and to create characters that people really resonate with and can see themselves in, or just know somebody in their life that reminds them of them. And so yeah, I've gotten a lot of comments about that sentiment exactly. And it always makes me feel validated that my goal is being achieved, that the characters that I'm writing are relatable and rootable, even if they're flawed. And I strive for every character to be flawed because every human being is flawed. We are all not perfect. So yeah, it really does hit
Awesome.
home whenever that happens.
Yeah, that is awesome. Are there specific principles that you want to teach in your show that inspire you? You had mentioned, I'll give you an example. Every human is flawed, and so,
Hmm.
for me, an example of some elements that I want in my show is, my show is a wacky, zany thriller game show inside of a haunted Victorian mansion, but in its essence, it's a story about forgiveness, redemption, and overcoming trauma.
Mm,
And so, those are some juicy and very colorful things that we get to explore. But also, we talk a little bit about what makes a hero. What is
yeah,
a hero? Because I think we've forgotten what that means nowadays. What it means to be a hero. In my
absolutely.
opinion, like, and this is going to be very telling of modern day entertainment. A villain is going to be the kind of person that no matter what, he's going to try and screw over everyone. His own villain friends, the heroes, especially, his opposition. But the hero is always going to show mercy to the villain,
Mm,
no
mm-hmm.
matter what, all the way up until you can't, right?
Yep.
Um, and and I see a lot of modern day entertainment portray the protagonist and they vindicate them with revenge. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, well, I'm vindicated in my revenge. And I just don't think that that's what a hero is.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm very inspired by reconstructing what it means to be a hero, to look the other way, to forgive, to give out grace, and to allow people to find redemption, especially beyond cancel culture itself.
Mm.
But um, are there specific principles that you want to dive into in your story, things that really mean something to you that you want to share, and that isn't propaganda in any
Mm.
way, but
Yeah.
just like a wholesome lesson?
Absolutely. Yeah, my prior work, I didn't really strive for like a narrative through line, like an overarching storyline that had a one big giant theme or message. There was a lot of like smaller stories that kind of usually ended with the winner having like the quote unquote overarching story of the season or the theme or the message, whatever that was. But as it relates to the reality gauntlet and the reality resort in general, um, I've grown up a lot, matured a lot. I feel like in my faith and my education and my just real life experiences, just going through a lot of good and bad things in life. I feel like I'm not. I feel like I have intentionally designed every show in this series to have an emotional and narrative through line with a specific purpose and theme or message that you can track from beginning to end. And that is one of the biggest things that I wanted to accomplish with this is as it relates to this feeling like this is our calling, right? Like there is no point of telling a story if you don't have a story to tell. So you need to have something that you want to say. And like to your point, it doesn't have to be propaganda. Like, and of course that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to force any sort of agenda. It really comes down to human
Oh yeah.
principles and human relatable stories. And I don't want to spoil what Resorts is because it probably would give away the winner, but each season will have a guiding principle, a guiding story about humanity in some regard and some theme. Because my goal is to tell, for the most part, positive and aspirational stories. That doesn't mean that the
Yes.
hero is always going to win because it is reality TV to an extent, right? We got to be. I like to play that line of realistic as well. But to your point and to your question, yeah, every season will have a very intentionally crafted through line that serves a purpose of trying to not really teach anything, so to speak, but sort of just reinstill or showcase some sort of emotional message, yeah, theme, tone, whatever you want to call it. Um, yeah, to just kind of like guide people towards thinking a little bit more deeply or a little bit more emotionally complex. Just think about their connections and humanity as a whole. So, yeah, and I know that you're like you just explained that you're doing the same thing, and that's I think something that really makes me feel super confident is and just trusting you and just relying on you for feedback and advice because I know that you think similarly and that you want to share stories and it also comes back to the principle of this podcast, right? Is that we want to create a positive, safe space for discussion, where we don't have to worry about our opinions being mocked or torn apart or telling us that we're toxic or negative or whatever, right? Like we could just share our opinions and bring peace back to discussions, right? So, of
Well, that was very juicy. I appreciate that. Thank you for sharing that. I
course.
think when I was in high school, the first job I ever had was I worked at Subway.
Mm.
I was a sandwich artist. I can
You
make
look
you a
like you worked at
mean
Subway.
sandwich, man. I don't know if I should take that as a compliment or an insult, but but I'll take it, man.
Please do.
Thank you. It's my slender physique. Very similar to a story you just shared with one of your fans kind of explaining it to you, but I would come home from work and we were as a family, I'm the baby of five, and so
Mm.
all of my siblings were already out of the house. If they weren't in college, they were graduated from college, starting families, things like that. Um, and so I was home alone, and my parents were out on, I think, a business trip, my dad's business, what he did for work, and they were gone. And so
Mm.
I was home alone. I came home, I was eating my Subway, and I was watching Total Drama All Stars, and it became a a really, how do I say this? The memory itself is imprinted in my mind
Yeah.
very strong of me going through this routine constantly. Like every week I would work at Subway. I'd get excited to get off work because I had recorded the new Total Drama Action, which was supposed to be on that night. Was it DVR? I forget what we call it when you were
Something like
like
that. Yeah.
you were recording something on cable to be watched and viewed later, and so I would come home, I would unwrap my foot long Italian herbs and cheese BMT, and I would just start eating and I would start watching, and there was something so sentimental and peaceful
Yeah.
about that moment, even though I have my opinions about All Stars, which they are opinions, they're just subjective. um I still found myself really enjoying the time that I had. It was quality time with myself. It was like I was taking myself on a date after a hard
Yeah.
day's work. Um,
So cute.
and it was, yeah, you know what? I learned some things from that, right? And one of them is that you need to recharge your batteries with what you love.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
you know, and right now I have kind of my own, it's not a religious thing at all. But people, when they hear me say this specific thing, they're like, that sounds religious. It's not. I have this motto nowadays that started back when I was a kid and was inspired by these moments
Mm.
that I look back on, and that's give yourself a seventh day. And that means for me, on Saturdays, I turn off my technology. Well,
Mm.
I shouldn't say technology. I turn off my social media.
Yeah.
Um, and I tap out of the world and I take myself out. Sometimes that's just secluding myself in my room, door dashing Subway, and watching a movie. But I give myself a seventh day to recharge my batteries, and then for some reason that's where some of my healthiest thoughts go or come from, and then I write, and usually my seventh day is 85% is me writing because I
Absolutely.
love
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But I don't intend for that to be the case, and I learned that from that just specific moment, which kind of relates to something you shared a little bit.
Yeah. Absolutely.
But yeah, I just thought that was really interesting. Look at that. our worlds are very symbiotic in
They
a lot
are.
of
It's funny.
ways.
It's a small world. Everyone has a lot of shared experiences that we would never otherwise have known. So pretty cool.
It's true. It's very true.
All right, so let's start wrapping it up there. I think we've talked a lot about ourselves in this first episode. Hopefully, you guys got to know us a little bit better and kind of our backgrounds, and we'll of course continue to uncover more of our history and background and experiences as we continue to make more episodes and make more content for you guys. But we did just want to close off real quick before we do our ending with just a reality resort progress update. I think that is one segment we would always like to keep in these episodes is for the fans of Reality Resort and the project in general, just to give you guys a quick glimpse into production and what's going on behind the scenes. So as the day of recording this, it is March 20th. Our Kickstarter campaign for episodes 13 or 12 and 13, excuse me, was successfully funded. Super grateful, super appreciative. We did not know how this was going to go. This is our third campaign that has been successfully funded, and it's just kind of crazy and surreal that people are continuously willing to support us financially. And just really, again, goes to show how much you guys care and want this product and how much time and effort and energy we're willing and able to put into it to keep giving it to you guys. So we're super thankful and just grateful. I know everyone on the team is just so ecstatic to keep working on the project. So with that, episode 12 has been being worked on. By the time this goes live, episode 12 is probably going to be about halfway done. So we're hoping for a late April, early May release for episode 12. I'm hoping episode 13 will follow in June, roughly. But now we're fully cleared to keep working on it. We wanted to start production a little bit earlier in the event that the campaign did succeed, so that we could get at least a little bit of work done and not just have to wait until the end of the campaign to start it. But yeah, and I also just want to quickly emphasize that this podcast will not be replacing Reality Resort. It is just purely supplemental content to help bridge the gap in between episodes. It's also just going to be not purely supplemental. I don't want to say that because this is really fun for us and we do really enjoy this and we've always been wanting to do this for a while. So it's just extra content for you guys. And honestly, selfishly, it's just a place and a time for us to hang out and talk shop about our shows and Total Drama and all the things that we care and love about and share it with you guys. So I just wanted to make sure that that was properly communicated. We also want to end each episode with a sort of question of the day, I guess, or a question to pose to you, to the fans. And Derek, would you like to read this episode's question of the day?
Okay. Who do you guys think our favorite characters are, especially for those of you who are tuning in for the first time? Who do you think our favorite characters are from the Total Drama series? I'd be really curious to kind of hear your responses. We want to interact with you guys as much as possible. This audience is a collective of a lot of different opinions and personalities and just diverse backgrounds and different walks of life. And so we'd love to hear back from you. And a way that you can interact with us specifically is by participating in the Patreon. Go over there, watch the news feeds that pop out, that Cove places on there for Reality Resort, and every so often maybe we sprinkle in a couple questions. So go over to the Reality Resort Patreon if you want to not collaborate. If you want to participate in different polls and get status updates on Cove's show, as well as just have the opportunity to be a part of that community and contribute to the upbringing of his show as well. I think that that'll be a lot of fun. But again, going back to the question of the day is, who do you guys think our favorite characters are? We want to create some themes that we go through in each podcast. We discussed a little bit about, random roulette crack ships that we could try and spar with, which we think would be really, really fun. And so we'd like to explore just really fun ideas and themes. So if you have any ideas on things that you want us to talk about, then we would love to hear it. Again, it's just two guys who are hanging out and having a good time, and we want you guys to be able to hang out with us as well. So welcome to our podcast. We don't specifically have a name for the community itself. We don't want to give you a very cliche name like campers or
Marshmallows.
I don't know. Marshmallows, right?
Yeah,
So if you have any creative suggestions for that too, we are open ears, but we're so very grateful for the support that we see for our shows. I was very surprised at the amount of comments, which I did read the comments. There were a couple in there that were like, "Whoa, Kruger Mansion is not canceled, like it's still a thing." And the answer is yeah, yeah, we're still cooking behind the scenes. It's just
super
indie
excited.
animation is tough, and everybody has their own strategy on what they're doing moving forward. And Cove and I's strategies, though they're very similar, we're also taking different paths, and we might end up in the same place
Who
together,
knows?
but
Yeah,
but ultimately, like we've been able to support each other and watch each other's growth along the way, and I think that that's been very inspiring in the long run. So you guys inspire us in a lot of ways too. You motivate us in different ways. We're inspired on our own. You know, there's a lot of different things that inspire us, but you guys are an element that contributes to that funnel of inspiration. And so we are so deeply appreciative of that support. So thank you very much.
absolutely. I echo everything he just said because he says it so much more eloquently than I could ever say it.
Ah,
But just to
stop it.
just to
Stop.
just to clean up the housekeeping here at the end, if you guys are looking for ways to support the show or where to watch it, episodes will be coming out for paying Patreon members first. The week later, they'll be coming out for free Patreon members, and then the week after that, it'll be audio only on YouTube and wherever else you get your podcasts, so Spotify, Apple Music, etc. If you're a paying Patreon at a certain tier, you can also get access to extended versions. We will be doing, starting with episode 2, extended versions of the podcast. So we'll try to keep each podcast episode to about 60 minutes, and then the extended versions will be up to another hour essentially, just as a thank you for your support. And then lastly, at the 2 highest tiers on our Patreon, you guys will get access to polls. You'll be able to answer polls as well as leave comments for us to answer, leave questions for us to answer in the comments. So for a special member segment in the extended version. So just wanted to throw that out there. We have a very special guest lined up for next episode that we're very excited about. It'll be a
Yeah, we
very,
do.
very, I don't know what the word is, but very welcomed topic to discuss. I think something that the community will be very excited to hear about and kind of get the scoop on and kind of put to bed at the same time. So I'm looking forward to
It's
that.
been years.
Yeah,
It's been years that we've been building up to this, and we're just gonna blindside them with this guest who's gonna spill all the tea.
absolutely. And we
But
do
in a
we
good way.
yes, and we will be having guests intermittently throughout this entire podcast. So we have plenty. We have a few lined up. We have plenty that we're going to inquire and ask about. But we don't want to just limit this conversation to just us. We want to bring in people both from the community and maybe the industry as well. And then just some friends and fans and whatever. So, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's it for this first episode. Derek, you want to sign us off, or do you have anything else to say?
100%. Well, thank you very much for turning the time over to me, Cove. Should I call you Dan or should I call you Cove on
I
the
don't care.
pod? Outside of the pod, I call you Dan.
I don't care. Yeah.
But um, well, signing off. We're 2 different showrunners with a very similar mission. We are inspired by the content and the community itself. So if you would like to join this community, feel free to subscribe, follow, like, do whatever, smash whatever buttons are below, unless it's the downplay button, the thumbs down. Unless you actually hated this podcast, then feel free to press
Yeah,
that.
let us know.
But
Yeah.
but if you do, we will find you,
Yeah, yeah.
and then we will tickle you, and then leave. And then, just kidding, that was weird. Um, but we're very grateful for the time that we had to share with each other as well as with you. So if you'd like to support us, do that in any way that you can, whether that's by going to Cove's Patreon and supporting him financially, or just clicking that subscribe button, or even just watching the podcasts. You'll be able to find us on not only YouTube, Spotify, but also on TikTok and Instagram. So go ahead and shoot us follows there as well. But we're very grateful. Thank you so much. Signing off. We are the Final Marshmallow. And have a
Bye-bye.
great day. Bye.